It's Joy with the Oil and Gas Global Network for the Supply Chain Podcast, Unchained. And with me today, I have my good friend, Mark LaCour. And we're going to be talking about some exciting stuff.
I don't know if it's going to be exciting, but love that you're one of our newest podcasters. Love your numbers. The audiences are loving what you're doing.
Thank you.
Your sponsors loving what you're doing. And so I'd stop in and share a little something unique. If you pay attention to anything that we do, you know that every year I do my predictions for the following year. So every November, I'm going to do my predictions for the next year. My predictions for 2026 will come out in 2 months in November. But, Joy, I'm going to share with your audience one of the predictions early so they get an insider peek. And this is one of the ones I'm sure people will say I'm crazy. They do that for about half the time I do these predictions. However, so one of my predictions for 2026 in the oil and gas industry is that the state of Texas will become the world center for data centers. Now, you go, how is that connected to oil and gas, Mark? That's technology, right? Well, those data centers need electricity. And part of the reason I think Texas is going to become such a big mecca for data centers is our ability to provide electricity so cheaply because we have the raw feedstock, natural gas, in the ground underneath our feet. And our state legislature and the public perception is very pro natural gas. So it's just a perfect fit. But here's where it ties into your audiences and your podcast. In order to make that work, the logistics have to be there, and the logistics have to be inexpensive. So let me kind of lay out what I think is going to happen. So talk about natural gas, talk about the abundance we have here in Texas. It's the only quick fuel to run data centers on. We all know the story about the explosion in AI. It's driving the need for new data centers to be built all over the world. But you need a couple of things for a data center. You need cheap surface land because they're physically very big. You want to have no negative public perception. So you're not going to build a data center downtown somewhere, right? Because people won't want to see that massive sprawled building sitting in their backyard. You need abundant, reliable, cheap electricity, and you need the ability to transport all the parts and pieces that it takes to not only build a data center, but to build all the infrastructure to support it. And Texas is the only state that I know of in the country that has all of that. So cheap land, surface land out in the Permian. Right now, people are making millions off the minerals that are underneath their feet, including natural gas. But the surface isn't being utilized because there's not enough rainfall to do agriculture. There's some ranching out there, but it's low margin business. However, if you're a landowner and that land's been in your family for a long time, and for a long time you've made money from mineral rights, and somebody comes to you and wants to write you a check for, say, I don't know, $800,000 a month for 99 years to build a data center on your surface, you're probably going to say yes to that. And then that same company has to build the infrastructure to generate the electricity. That's turbines and pipes and valves and recovery and all that stuff. And you have to be able to get it out to these sites which are in the middle of nowhere, and you have to be able to do it effectively. And Texas have a couple advantages. One is we have deep water ports, so all these big parts and pieces can be hauled in from wherever in the world that they'll be sourced at. Second thing is we have a great rail system and a great highway system. However, that only brings us so far. The next half of that journey, the logistical journey, is hauling all these parts and pieces and work crews out in the middle of nowhere. And that's when logistics professionals like you come in and figure out how you work this magic. But we've done it before, and we're going to do it again. So there's one of my insights into 2026. I think Texas is going to start becoming the data center of the world because of all the different variables I've thrown in there. However, I have a question for you.
Okay.
If somebody threw this project at you, hey, Joy, we have this data center we're building 100 miles east of Odessa. We know all the parts and pieces. We know how to get them close to the site. How do we get them the last mile on these dirt roads, on these gravel roads, or sometimes no roads? How would a logistic professional tackle something like that?
Well, it's actually, thanks, and that's a good question. It's actually, in my mind, it's relatively easy.
Of course it is. That's why we're having this discussion.
So, depending on what we're moving, so if it's, basic, open deck, legal stuff, shipments that are going, which are, don't exceed the legal parameters of, say, a tractor trailer, those are really simple. You can even haul on dirt roads. You just got to compact the dirt. And a lot of companies like to bring in what they call Mexican caliche, and it's a gravel that packs together real tight and fairly easy.
So use it a lot on job sites. Weight from the truck.
Yeah, because you have to support the weight. And the nice thing about legal shipments is the weight per axle because it's established by DOT. Now, when you get into the big stuff, which you're talking about, say a turbine or any kind of something that's going to generate power, anything big, then you get a little crafty. So the last mile delivery, essentially, what we would do is we would lay crane mats down. And so you can get what's called laminated mats, and they're 20 feet by so many feet, and you just lay them down in a row. And they do that a lot for pipelining as well, when they're in like Louisiana and trying to pipeline through the swamps. And essentially, it's a temporary solution that they can do, and then when they're done, they take the mats back. A lot of the mat providers don't want to take the mats back after we're done with them, so that can be a really big sunk cost if they have to buy them, because they don't have the way to dispose of them.
And I've seen them work off mats. And if anybody hasn't seen it before, YouTube this, because it's amazing. It's basically huge wooden timbers fastened together, and they just lay it down like Lincoln logs and build a road. Or probably nobody knows what Lincoln logs are, like Legos.
Right.
And they build a road. But I'm guessing the reason that they don't want them back is a lot of them get torn up from the cranes.
Well, so essentially the laminated mats are thinner, so they're about half the width. Height, or rather, the crane mats, the ones that you're talking about, remind me of railroad ties that are tied together. Yeah. And those are pretty. Those. So the problem with the matting is that it's not a permanent solution, but you can only say if you need 120 mats, you can only bring, say, the laminated thin ones, 8 on a truck, or 4 of the big crane mats that you're referring to on a truck. And don't quote me, because that's just numbers off the top of my head, but you have to be within those legal parameters in order to move it. So the cost to mobilize and demobilize the mats is extremely expensive for transport, because they're specialized, they come on open deck carriers. However, if it's, you only need them for 6 months, it doesn't make sense to build an entire road to handle, say, my 200,000 pound generator, when you can lay crane mats down, and that it's really that simple. Another thing that you can do, that you wouldn't do necessarily on the dirt portion of it, but on the road itself going to where that cutoff is, we lay down steel. So
I've never even seen them do that.
So if you drive down the road, you'll see those steel plates that are on the road.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So we would lay those down, and we would lay them down so that when the cargo goes over it, it doesn't collapse the road beneath it. And it's a temporary solution, because you can kind of pick it up and place the steel where you need to, and then when you're done, you just remove it. But again, it's very expensive. If you need a lot of it, it's expensive. So it's an interesting topic to have, because it's weighing the cost of, is it cheaper for us to buy all these mats, or how long are we going to need the mats because there's a rental, and the delivery and the removal cost of the transport is very expensive for those options. So that's something that people often overlook. And
I'm sure all that's figured into the project planning and project budget. It's still amazing that in today's world you can source a turbine from China, have it shipped halfway across the world and delivered, and that was cheaper than buying one domestically, and having it delivered, because the delivery costs have to be, once you get to the States, the delivery costs have to be basically the same.
So essentially, yeah. So, and that's another good point you bring up, because they, something that's really that big, we want to find a water route for. If we can get as close as we can get to the area where it's going by water, that's the best thing. The Port of Houston is the second largest break bulk terminal in the world. And I've brought massive cargo through Houston that we've had to put on barges and bring up, through Texas. But you get into that last mile section, or the Odessa, where you're in the middle of nowhere and it's just dirt and oil wells. That's where it gets interesting. And the nice part about moving through there is that it's not densely populated. Right. So it's less electrical lines that we'll have to take outages for. It's less data lines that we'll have to move and relocate. We typically, our biggest struggle would be the hard arms on railroad crossings, because the railroads don't like us touching those. But it's very expensive. So those services that you have to procure, not necessarily the actual workers and the transport equipment, it's all your third-party reimbursable services, the power company, the data companies, the bucket trucks that go with you, your police escorts. All of those are not something that's easily forecasted. We have to take a best guess based on our experience and knowing how to move things and what it's going to take. And that's always where that gets tricky, because that part is often almost always missed. And a lot of times some carriers will leave that out because they're afraid to quote it, because they don't want their feet held to the flames on an exact number, because it's a reimbursable cost. So that's often what comes back to bite people, is they have a beautiful gas turbine that they're going to bring from the Port of Houston to Odessa. And next thing you know, they said it would cost arbitrarily $400,000 to move it, but then the buyer gets a bill of $2 million for reimbursables for support services for the haul, and they're like, whoa, what's this? So it's always important for that part, is because it's not necessarily the transport that's going to bite you. It is on the big stuff, that third party services.
It is funny. We're getting a total rabbit hole here.
I know.
But you said Port of Houston and big shipments. I watched Technique FNC ship out several trees, subsea trees, out of the Port of Houston, and the whole undertaking is just beautiful. It's like an orchestra, but instead of playing instruments, they're doing slings and ropes and change, and everything had to be done perfectly, or they were going to ruin this however many millions of dollars this tree caught. And they had to move it from multiple flatbed to short rail to a barge, and they pulled it off, and it was the orchestration of all those people doing it at the same time. They really know what they're doing. If you ever get a chance to watch it, you have to watch it. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and it's even more fun to watch it from the bridge of a ship.
I bet. So another thing, so if I'm right about this, once these data centers get built and they're up and operational, the next thing they're going to need is a supply of spare parts, right? And I'm not necessarily meaning servers and Cat 6 cable, but things like compressors for HVAC, all the bearings and process automation that goes in all the parts and pieces, all that sort of stuff. And so when that's going to be a subset of prosperity for Texas. And once these things get built, the construction crews are going to go back. So you have a big influx of people building it, but you have to keep people all the time. They have to run these things and do the support. And there's another layer of jobs that are permanent. And then think about things like hotels and restaurants that are near these data centers. All of those people and those businesses are going to benefit as well. Then when you're looking at the logistics of maintaining all these data centers, say 10 years from now, I think you and I know a certain software company that's probably pretty good at maintaining that type of inventory. Big plug for your sponsor. Thought it would fit right into the conversation.
No, perfect, I forgot to mention them in the beginning. So no, it's good. Verison has some very interesting and good capabilities. Not just saying that because they're my sponsor, but I'm saying it because I've actually spoken with them and gotten to know their product. And their capabilities are to minimize what you have to have on hand to save you money, so that but because we talked about this with them, where you get a person that manages a property and they have to have these things, where you could maybe have one bearing for 4 different sites. Yep. And so that's kind of being able to manage your materials that way. Now we're getting more into standardized, say, machines. As the world starts to become more standard.
Thank goodness.
Yes, yes, because it's not fun when you have to get a bearing from Germany overnight and you're hemorrhaging thousands of dollars an hour because you're down.
Right.
So, been there. So the thing is that you can say, well, I have 4 machines over in this area, so I'm just going to stock. They'll build, like, say, a little shed that's, temperature controlled shed on the property where one of those locations is, and that's where they'll house the spare parts. Yeah. And so it's something as simple as that. We see that a lot. With the plants that I used to build, that's very common, where they'll keep the spare parts in a little shed on the site.
But even in the plants that you used to build, that plant itself probably at some point knew what spare parts it had and where they were, but they probably had a sister plant a state away who didn't know, and it might have been cheaper and faster for them to share that information, which they weren't doing. And this sounds like in the past, this still goes on.
No, so that's one of the things I used to do, is we would work with the closest plant that I was at. We would order the 2-year spares with the cargo when we bought the facility, and then it's very common for them to order 2-year spares. And this has been done at all the companies I worked for. And then usually you contact a sister facility that's right by there and say, hey, can I put this in your warehouse? Because you're going to need it. The problem with that, though, is oftentimes it's not controlled. So if you've got a technician or somebody that's going out and they're just taking and doing, if they have an emergency outage or they have a planned outage, and they're just taking and doing from those spares, sometimes they don't often get noted. It gets forgotten. So that's where the material management side of it comes in, which is great for Verison's product, because then it's able to tell you where who has what and how much of it do you have. And so it's almost like it updates without needing that human sense of the the accountability of the human part of it to remember to do it. So
that's my favorite part of what they do, is that it used to depend on experience. Hey, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know that I have extra set of seals over here in this cabinet. And when that guy retires, that knowledge goes with him or her.
Yep.
And what Verison does is make that foolproof. And I'm not trying to turn your show into a Verison commercial.
No, but that's great.
When we start looking at these data centers and the amount of spare parts they're going to need, because just like an oil rig, these data centers are going to have to run 24/7, 7 days a week, and if there's downtime, they lose money. And so they're going to make sure they maximize their uptime, and part of that is going to be planning for future outages, either planned or unplanned outages. And once again, there's going to be a whole level of jobs created and prosperity for these small communities around Texas. It's going to be a beautiful thing.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because one thing that's pretty common for us to do when we're moving something really, really big, especially in the middle of nowhere, is you go to the landowners, because we have to park overnight. Maybe you might get 3 or 4 miles, depending on how big of a piece this is. I moved some engines that were 400,000 plus pounds, and we'd get like maybe 10 miles
Jeez.
in a 12-hour night. Yeah, it's wild.
You're not doing 65 miles an hour down the interstate.
No, you probably don't want that. It's like a loose cannon, just getting ready. We just need the right amount of inertia for it to just go. But no. So we work with a lot of the landowners along the haul route, where the carriers will rent a section of land. They'll mat it up, put gravel down, mat it up, so that they can stage and park overnight at a place that's off the main road, that's safe. And where they could have, they don't necessarily have to worry about round-the-clock security, because it's not accessible to the public.
Yeah.
Because that's always a big, big challenge, is trying to find that. So even the landowners that are along the way of that route can benefit from that as well. And it's common to do that often. And, and a lot of times they don't want us to remove the gravel. They'll end up putting something on it. They like it. And it's a cost saver for the customer too. So it's kind of interesting how
it's
all that
cool.
works.
It's a win-win, like kind of helping your local community a little bit, even though you may only be in that local community for a few hours while you make your stop.
Well, and that's the other thing too. We hire the off-duty police officers to manage the hauls, to go with the hauls. In Texas, we usually use the police that we have here in Houston, but some counties or some locations will require we use their officers. And it's great, because it's a great way to put the local officers to work after hours. They get overtime, they get to make some money, and we're using their services, and we're putting their people to work, which is what we essentially want to do. We don't want to come in and take over and then say it's us and you. No, we want to work with you, because at the end of the day, I need you to be on board with me in order for me to get my stuff through your town.
Makes total sense to me.
Because if you're not on board with me, you're not going to let me move.
So one of the things I love about this conversation is that it's apparent your experience. You rattled off stuff I didn't even know existed, because you've done it a bunch of times. Let me ask you this. If somebody's new in supply chain, a big, heavy, complex move like this is probably not something you would assign to somebody new. You want somebody with more experience. But how does a young supply chain professional get that experience? How do they get to the point where they could do what you do?
For me, I was thrown into the deep end of the pond.
I
was like trial by fire. I learned as I went. And that's honestly, it's kind of if you don't make mistakes, you're not learning. And so, the worst mistake you can make is not understanding your climate, not allowing enough time to do this, to get the permits, to do everything. That will definitely hurt you, because it's not like you can throw money at that problem. You still have to have your bridge engineers, your studies done, everything. And that's multiple different people that are coming in to do this in order for one piece just to go down the road, and sometimes maybe 5 miles. So, but that's the thing, not allowing enough time. So really it's having somebody that's kind of like I guess the logistics manager, and then they have
More
the
junior people under
coordinators,
them.
yes,
Yeah.
doing the boots on the ground, that work, where they're getting the hands-on work experience, and they're learning, because that's the only way really you're going to learn is you have to be in the field. You have to understand how long it takes to lower a dolly on a trailer, and it's sometimes several hours that you wouldn't normally think,
Right.
just so you can go over a small culvert, and then you got to stop and pull it back up. So, and that's another couple hours. So it's a lot of intricate things that happen that people don't really understand unless you're in it, to do it. And the world of super transport logistics is not like putting stuff on, say, a yellow truck or a UPS freight or FedEx freight truck that's closed van that's got a guy that's a Teamster driver who has a set route, set delivery schedule. No, it's nothing like that. So sometimes we have to haul only at night. And it's not always fun. You encounter a lot of dangerous situations with drunk people, with all kinds of different situations. But yeah, it's there's an element of surprise. One of the things I told somebody the other day is kind of funny. I was talking about, we spend 2 years planning these moves, and we're in this business, we're very connected. Everybody knows everybody. You stand side by side, sit by side with somebody for 2 years to plan a huge move, and you go and you're all ready, and then 6 months before you're about to move, somebody paved a road, and now you can't get under a bridge.
Oh, wow. Well, you said something earlier that I didn't even think of either. You mentioned bridge engineers, and in the back of my head, of course, you can't just bring a weight across a bridge without having somebody doing the structural analysis to make sure you don't ruin the bridge. Because if you think the price tag of moving that piece of equipment's big, wait till you get the bill for ruining a bridge.
Well, so the way the permitting's done, so some states have their in-house bridge engineers that will review it. In Texas, you have to hire an outside bridge engineer, and a lot of them work with some really great guys and ladies that are in this business, that are able to turn around stuff relatively quickly. But the tech stop, for one, will not issue a permit without the sign off. So the permit comes with multiple different signatures that have to happen. So your power company being probably at the top of that list.
Right.
Because if you're going to mess with electrical, you're dead in the water if you do anything. Literally, you can kill
Literally
people.
could be dead in the water.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, it's so critical that it's almost like a system of checks and balances that have to go through. And in Texas, the utilities have to call in to TxDOT, if I'm not mistaken, if it's still the same as it was before, and they have to give them a code or something to say that they're blessing that permit. So it's not like I can call and say, oh, hey, Deborah, Energy said they're fine, we can go ahead and get no, it's not how that works. So it's a lot of indifference, lots of meetings, it's lots of conversations, and honestly, that's the part that will bite you the most, is not communicating.
I can see how this involves a ton of project management.
Yes.
Management. The other thing that you mentioned is all of a sudden this road was paved that it wasn't, but you made me think of something. You also can't control the weather, can you? Right?
Nope.
And so you may have spent 2 years planning out this big move, and all of a sudden we get bad rain, and roads that were normally dry and firm are not passable anymore.
Or a hurricane.
Well,
you're right after you unloaded a ship in New Orleans.
Sounds like experience once again.
Yeah,
A little bit.
It's a running joke that it's either there's not a storm coming in or my birthday or holiday and the ship's coming out with my cargo on it. It's always the joke. I've had to deal with multiple tropical issues at Port of Houston and at Port of New Orleans, but that's just a factor, But yes, the roads washing out is a serious issue in the desert. I mean, because and as soon as the roads they dry, it's almost like a drought comes instantaneously. Yep. Like it's not like, oh, it's just saturated. It's either really saturated or it's really dry. It's not in between. So that's the other part of the caveat to that problem is once you start trucking in rock and dirt, and now you're just going up, 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 up. But then that's, the important thing is to knowing your risk up front. So when you're doing your proposals, you want to make sure that that's noted. You want to talk with your carriers, get to know them. Hey, what are things I need to be worried about? A lot of people don't ask those questions. So that's why it's so important to have a logistics person when you're moving.
Obviously so. So I know we're getting close to time.
No, it's great.
We're good time. Okay. So my next question is, when you do all this, a lot of it is project management, which should have been apparent, but wasn't until I just had the conversation with you. And people are building these data centers, and they're hauling all these big parts and pieces of equipment in, and you're bringing crews in to actually start doing the construction. Mm-hmm. Do logistics play a part in those teams of work crews that they have to bring in?
It does, not necessarily. So if they don't have parking at the facility, the location, they may have to rent school buses and rent some land further down the road where they would truck in. They get the guys on the and the girls. Sorry, I don't mean to be politically incorrect here, but they would get everybody on the buses ahead of for the morning, and then they bring them to the job site, and then they have their safety meetings and go from there. That's very common in places, especially like Louisiana, where it's plants right on top of each other, so they don't have much parking. And then there's the logistics of all the parts and pieces for the contractor, their equipment, their forms.
Do they handle that,
yes.
or does somebody else handle that?
Yes,
for them?
they usually have. The big contractors, the big contractors, they all have logistics people that will be in charge of getting everything that's needed to a job site. But then they have to have a person who has to know what has to go to the job site. So
that's true.
It's so many intricate parts that go into it. So just because I do the big stuff doesn't mean I can go and pick up a material manager position and be able to say, I got to get this there. Because that animal's completely different. Parts and pieces is completely different from moving versus big stuff. It's two different risks, different situations, So it's a lot to take, to really have to know. And that's why it's so, when I speak at conferences and stuff, I say this all the time. It's so important to engage your logistics people anytime you have something like this happening, so you can know not only the cost, but your risk. Because that's the part that, you may not, you think, oh, okay, well, they paved a road. Well, yeah, now I got to chop my piece in half and then try to put it back together. And when it's, giant vessel that's closed, I no longer have a vessel. So I have to either figure out how to get around the bridge, go above the bridge. And that's a whole nother issue there. Don't ask me that one, because I have to build a bridge to go over a bridge, and that's not fun.
So you made me think of something else. So most of the companies that are involved in this whole process I'm talking about, they're for profit, right? So everybody needs to make $1. I can imagine bidding a job like this and missing one crucial piece of the logistics puzzle, and all of a sudden a job that I thought on paper was profitable, I'm now upside down and I'm losing money. In fact, I'm bleeding money, right? So probably when I think about it from a business point of view, my logistical part is probably, because of all the variables, the part I want to get locked down first. Because buying the parts and pieces are probably much simpler to keep from making a mistake in than actually getting to the location.
Under normal circumstances, yes. Pandemic was trial by fire. Nobody knew what we didn't even know what to do. So, but now that we're obviously post-pandemic, we've had a lot of lessons learned from that. Traditional methods of getting stuff to facilities, we had to employ different ones. We had to start using a lot of maybe the mom and pop carriers, that have that are able to haul bigger stuff that's legal on their trailer. Have just one, and it's it's a couple that'll drive the whole way. One drives during the day, one drives at night, and they take it the whole way. And they're just a small business person, which is great because the pandemic forced us to really start looking at those people, and it's putting those hardworking people to work as well. A lot of our escorts are civilian escorts that go with the loads. Those are all small business owners as well. So it's really neat how the whole supply chain comes full circle. And the contractors, important to note, the contractors are also using software similar to like what Verison does. Because they may have a bill of material for a whole project, and that's what they're ordering off of, but they have to have some way to manage that inventory. And where does the inventory get managed, and how does it get managed, and by whom? So I know at some jobs, we've seen them build warehouses to have all
just for the job, yeah,
just for the contractors' materials to go in, and that's quite common on big jobs. But they have actual people that specifically manage just that.
I can't even imagine building a temporary warehouse for a project and then stocking it, tracking all of that stuff, and at some point the job is finished. So now either the warehouse is turned into something else, and I guess you move on to the next one.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's pretty much, it's blow and go. And it's really not, because it's like 4 years of a project. But I mean, that's what we call it, is blow and go, because you know, sometimes these customers don't want the building. They don't want the liability for it.
So then you have to tear down the building. Right.
So, but that's all got to be discussed up front. And that's the same thing. It's getting to know your people, especially in logistics. I mean, logistics is probably one of the few and far between things where you can still do business on a handshake.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, and people, and this is in the U.S. really. That just doesn't work elsewhere, because you know, in Texas, you need something yesterday. If your drill rig's down and you need to be going. I mean, you need to just, hey, buddy, can you go pick this up for me and get this pipe over to here, and I need it there in 2 hours. And, you know, that's not necessarily a physical handshake, but that's what it is.
Right.
You know, so there's a lot of intricate, like, small pieces to the puzzle that the mom and pop or the small business owners contribute and make a huge, big part of it. You know, a big part of what seems so tiny. But, you know, those relationships are what you have to have. You have to have relationships with your people, with your carriers, with your providers, with everybody. Because if they don't like you, they're not going to be really apt to help you in the middle of the night. And if they do help you in the middle of the night, it's going to be really expensive.
Yeah. Golly, Joy, I didn't see all this trickle-down domino effect of literally moving something big.
And I was supposed to interview you.
Yeah, I know, but I've learned so much. It's one of my favorite things about what I do for a living is literally every day I learn something new.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, it feels good to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. And even though we work together, we never talk. And it's not just you. No. The rest of my hosts. I never talk. We're so busy growing this company, running, that I never get a chance. It's rare that I join any other show. This was fun. It's a little strange to be on the other side of the microphone.
But you're actually interviewing me, though.
Yeah. So maybe
I was supposed to interview you.
So maybe I'll be quiet for a minute or two and let you ask some questions.
Well, I mean, you know, it's funny when you say the data centers, right? I mean, now, when you say that they can capitalize, when you say natural gas, exactly what do you mean by that?
So the electrical generation capacity of natural gas, as far as getting enough gigawatts up to speed quickly, there's no faster way to do it. I personally believe the whole world should be running on nuclear for electricity, but let's be honest, you can't build a nuclear plant in the U.S. in a year, right? It takes 10 years to get things permitted at the very minimum.
Have you ever done that?
I actually one summer worked to turn around a nuclear plant, so I know a little bit about it.
Yeah,
but also know the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is a, let's say, pain in the butt, to put it mildly, to get stuff done. But the ability to use gas turbines, I mean, you can literally stand up a 10 gigawatt facility in 6 months and power a data center. And we have the natural gas. We have the ability to get the turbines here. We have the cheap surface rights. Joy and I were joking about the weather. We do get hurricanes here, but overall we have pretty good weather, right? So overall, I think the Texas is perfect to build low-cost data centers, but also to operate them for a very long period of time. And I'm looking forward to this. It'd be cool for the Texas economy to have another source of income besides oil and gas, besides space and medical. I think it'd be cool if we led the world data centers.
Well, exactly. I mean, you know, a lot of people think California, but California is extremely difficult to move anything big in. You know, I've done it. I've done it, and I've felt the pain of not giving myself enough time to permit. So that's how you learn from things. But the way Texas is set up, I mean, it's extremely industrial. Most of the state is, unless you get down to the Beaumont area, kind of. It's much older, but Galveston area down there and Manchester terminals over there. A lot of that's older infrastructure, but Texas is wide open. Once you get out of the big city, you can shoot a cannon off and you're
not
totally
anything,
fine. Yeah, I mean, so that's what makes moving in Texas great. And the resources are there. You have people that mobilize from Texas to go work in jobs in Washington and in Oregon. So it's really neat how that happens. But Texas has the ability to be able to provide that. It's exciting because I never thought about data centers.
And then the final piece of the puzzle is we have the skilled workforce.
Yes.
So this country is short on skilled labor, welders, pipe fitters, machinists.
Yeah.
However, because of our immigrant population here, we have a large skilled workforce compared to other states. So the final piece of that puzzle that cost puzzle is the workforce to build the data centers. And I would put Texas against any other state in the country right now in 2025 on who has the biggest pool of that type of labor to pull from. And I think we do. So when I look at all the pieces, to me, it just makes natural sense.
It does. It's just, that's the thing. I mean, it's exciting because I didn't ever think about the data centers and that they could just tap into a well and power up. Now, I mean,
literally that almost, yeah. And the cost of electricity is going to be consistent and cheap. The other thing is, Texas grid isn't attached to the rest of the country. We've done that on purpose. And whether it's a good thing or bad thing, we can have that discussion later over drinks. However, though, our grid owners, our infrastructure owners in the state of Texas are now starting to extend that grid into rural areas because the electrification of the oil field. So it used to be if you were drilling a well, that drill rig probably ran, the top drive was probably electric, but it ran on diesel generators.
Yep.
Now we figure out how to run those gen sets on the well gas itself so we don't have to haul in diesel, right? Which is better for the environment. It lowers the cost and it takes something that was a waste product, that flare gas, and turns it into something amazing. But the electric utilities are now wanting to bring in what I call factory power or grid power to power those same rigs. Well, if they build that infrastructure and you have a data center right there in the middle of nowhere, you now have options. And the data center will probably overbuild its electrical generation capacity, right? So if they need 25 gigawatts, they'll probably build 40 for future expansion.
Right.
Once they connect to the grid, Joy, then they can sell that extra electricity on the grid, which then should lower all of our electricity prices. So then the public should be happy these data centers are being brought in because it should lower our electrical prices. And then the bigger thing is, if I'm Amazon or if I'm Meta and I'm building a data center for my own use, I'm probably building multiple data centers. I'm building this electrical generation capacity running on natural gas for my own use, and I'm building infrastructure. The electrical generation is going to be new, the infrastructure is going to be new, right? And you're going to overbuild it on purpose, which I think means somewhere in the future, you and I will plop down our credit card and buy electricity from Amazon or from Meta or from Microsoft. And I'm telling you, ERCOT, you've done a good job sometimes and a bad job sometimes, but your problem is you don't have competition. I would love to see us being able to literally buy electricity from somebody that generates it and owns the infrastructure, which is separate from the guy next to them, which would be a true competitive environment, which once again will help all of us.
And it's important that, like with Texas not being connected, because I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls sends power across the country.
The country, yeah. Without even trying hard.
I know, exactly. So when I first moved to Texas, and I was like, what do you mean we're not connected? And it was, but I mean, hey, Texas is meant to be self-sufficient. That's something they pride themselves on, is that self-sufficiency. They're different than everybody else.
Joy, you're not. It's not they. It's us. You've been here long enough.
I know.
I wasn't born in Texas either, but I am a Texan. It's us, and we do it for that ability to control our own destiny, but quite frankly, we also do it because we think it's better for our citizens. And we could discuss that point at another date and time.
That's a whole nother 35
a whole
minutes.
nother episode,
We'll have to have a follow-up about that one. But no, I really appreciate this conversation. I'm sorry that I didn't really get to interview you, but I really appreciate you interviewing me. But we're about out of time.
This was fun.
So, yeah, it was. Well, we have to do it again sometime.
We will do it again.
So special thanks to our sponsor, Verison, for this awesome episode, and thanks, Mark, for being here with me and interviewing me. That was nice. So look forward to see everybody on the next episode. Bye.
Thanks for listening to OGGN, the world's largest and most listened to podcast network for the oil and energy industry. If you like this show, leave us a review and then go to OGGN.com to learn about all our other shows. And don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter. This show has been a production of the Oil and Gas Global Network.